There are moments in history when the warning signs are not subtle. They do not whisper. They do not hide in footnotes or intelligence reports. They come as a cold wind, sudden, unmistakable, carrying the message that something darker is approaching. Standing before the leaders of the Sahel, Ibrahim Traoré chose words that cut through diplomacy and comfort. He did not speak of markets or elections. He did not offer applause lines. He spoke instead of survival. The Black Winter is coming. Not a winter of snow or ice, but a winter of war, bloodshed, and deliberate chaos. A winter in which Africans may once again be turned against one another while unseen hands quietly extract wealth, power, and control from the shadows. For Americans who have lived through the Cold War, Vietnam, the Middle East, conflicts, and the long lessons of divided societies, this language feels hauntingly familiar. History teaches us that wars rarely begin with explosions. They begin with narratives, with divisions, with people convinced that their real enemy lives next door, not across the ocean. Traoré's warning was not shouted in anger. It was delivered with restraint, almost sorrow. He spoke of fires built to keep people warm, symbols of unity, of coats sewn to survive the cold, symbols of sovereignty, and of mountains raised to block the wind, symbols of collective strength. Yet again and again he warned those efforts are being sabotaged from within. This is not just a speech about Burkina Faso. It is not only about West Africa. It is about a continent standing at a crossroads and about a global system that has learned time and again how to profit when nations fracture under pressure. So the question is not whether a black winter is coming. The real question is this: when the storm arrives, will Africans stand together, or will history repeat itself once more? And just as importantly for the rest of the world, what happens to global stability when an entire region is pushed toward collapse? If you believe these warnings deserve more attention than headlines allow, please share this message. If you believe truth matters more than comfort, subscribe and stay with us as we unpack what this moment truly means for Africa and for the world. The warning about a coming black winter was not delivered on social media nor shouted from a protest stage. It came from the heart of power during a formal gathering of heads of state in a room where words are usually measured, filtered, and safe. The setting matters. In Bamako, leaders of the Alliance of Sahel States, known as S, gathered for their second summit. The alliance formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger was born out of crisis, relentless terrorist attacks, foreign military failures, and decades of political dependency that left ordinary citizens exposed and exhausted. When Ibrahim Traoré rose to speak, there was no script in front of him, no notes, no prepared document. What followed was not a policy briefing, it was a diagnosis. Traoré began by reminding the room of something Africa knows too well. History does not repeat itself exactly, but it often rhymes. He referenced the Arab Spring, a movement once sold as liberation, reform, and democratic awakening. In some countries, it produced change. In others, it unleashed years of instability, civil war, mass displacement, and foreign intervention. His point was not academic. It was deeply practical. He argued that Africa is once again facing a similar moment, not driven by popular uprising alone, but by engineered chaos, a slow buildup of insecurity, weapons appearing where no factories exist, fighters equipped far beyond what poverty should allow, conflicts spreading without clear fronts or endings. And this, he warned, is how winters begin. The Black Winter, he described, is not an abstract metaphor. It is a season defined by overlapping crises, terrorism, political sabotage, ethnic division, media manipulation, and economic extraction. A winter where neighbors turn on neighbors, while the true beneficiaries remain invisible and untouched. Traoré explained why X was created in the first place. The alliance, he said, was a response to the cold already creeping in. Each day, he noted, they search for logs to keep a fire burning, meaning cooperation, shared defense, and political clarity. The fire is meant to warm African hearts and minds, to create a center around which unity can form. But here his tone sharpened. He warned that the greatest threat is not always external. Some, he said, pour water on the logs every day, sabotaging unity from within. Others shatter the stones meant to build protective mountains, dismantling institutions before they can stand. These actors, whether knowingly or not, serve the interests of forces that profit from African weakness. This is where the speech becomes uncomfortable and powerful. Traoré did not spare African elites, media figures, or political opportunists who hide behind microphones and platforms to inflame hatred. He accused them of poisoning public discourse, of dividing communities for attention, influence, or favor. In modern conflict, he implied propaganda often kills long before bullets do. Yet, despite the gravity of his message, Traoré stopped short of calling for revenge or violence. In fact, he did the opposite. He urged calm, discipline, communication over physical retaliation. He warned that responding emotionally to provocation is precisely how chaos accelerates. For an American audience, this moment echoes familiar lessons. The Cold War, the Balkans, Iraq, and even domestic unrest all teach the same truth. When societies fracture internally, outside forces rarely rush to heal them. They exploit them. Traoré's central argument in this first phase of his speech is clear and unsettling. Africa is approaching a dangerous season, and the decisions made now will determine whether the continent emerges united or shattered. This was not a threat. It was a forecast. Every powerful speech has a moment when the air in the room changes, when listeners stop taking notes and begin taking sides in their own minds. In Bamako, that moment arrived quietly, not with raised voices or dramatic gestures, but with a single devastating question. After laying out the image of a coming black winter of firecoats, mountains, and wolves, Ibrahim Traoré paused and asked, "When winter comes, should those who fought against us be allowed to seek shelter under the coats we made? Should they hide behind the mountains we built to protect ourselves from the storm? Should they warm themselves at the fire they spent years trying to extinguish?" It was not a rhetorical flourish. It was a moral test. In that instant, the speech shifted from warning to reckoning. Traoré was no longer speaking only about geopolitics or security strategy. He was forcing African leaders, and by extension, African societies, to confront a painful truth: unity is hardest precisely when it costs something. The room reportedly fell silent. This question cut deep because it exposed a long-standing dilemma across post-colonial history. Time and again, African nations have tried to rebuild after crises only to see former collaborators, opportunists, and external beneficiaries quietly reintegrate, often rewarded rather than held accountable. Traoré did not explicitly call for exclusion or punishment. Instead, he demanded clarity. What does unity mean if it includes those who actively worked to divide? From there, the speech widened its scope. Traoré warned that the winter would not be local or contained. War, he said, is spreading across West Africa, not as conventional armies facing each other, but as fragmented violence, terrorism, and psychological warfare. He spoke of chaos that could take hold carefully, choosing his words emphasizing possibility, not inevitability. Still, the images were stark. He described a future where people might kill one another in atrocious ways, while others stand by watching from afar as resources are looted and political control is imposed. Survivors, he warned, would face only two outcomes: permanent unity against imperial domination or quiet submission until disappearance. The reaction to these words has been intense and divided. Supporters across the Sahel and African diaspora describe the speech as brutally honest, even overdue. They see it as a rare moment when a leader speaks openly about internal complicity, rather than blaming everything on foreign powers. To them, Traoré's message is not pessimistic, but preparatory, a call to brace for impact before it is too late. Critics, however, accuse him of using fear to consolidate power, of painting dissent as sabotage, and of framing political opposition as betrayal. Some media voices outside the region have labeled the speech inflammatory, warning that such language risks deepening polarization. Yet here lies the paradox: Traoré explicitly urged restraint. He cautioned against physical retaliation. He warned against responding emotionally to provocations, especially those amplified through media and social platforms. He called for communication patience and vigilance, arguing that violence among Africans only accelerates the very collapse imperial forces rely on. For American viewers familiar with Cold War rhetoric, civil rights struggles, and the consequences of internal division, the resonance is unmistakable. History shows that societies do not fall because enemies are strong, they fall because unity breaks under pressure. The climax of Traoré's speech was not a declaration of war, it was a mirror held up to a continent. And the reflection was uncomfortable. When leaders speak of war, statistics often come first. When Ibrahim Traoré spoke of the coming Black Winter, he began somewhere else with people. Not soldiers, not governments, but ordinary civilians who will carry the heaviest cost if the storm breaks loose. Traoré warned that when chaos takes hold, it does not arrive evenly. It enters through villages first, through markets that no longer open at dawn, through roads that become too dangerous to travel, through families who stop asking when life will improve and start asking how to survive another week. In the Sahel, civilians already live close to the edge. A spreading conflict would mean more than headlines about instability. It would mean mass displacement, children pulled out of school, healthcare systems collapsing under pressure, and entire regions slipping beyond the reach of any authority, legitimate or otherwise. This is how societies unravel quietly. Politically, the consequences are just as severe. Traore described a cycle that Africa has seen before. Insecurity weakens. The state, weakened states invite foreign solutions, and those solutions often come with conditions that erase sovereignty piece by piece. Elections held under fear lose legitimacy. Governments governing under threat lose trust, and institutions meant to protect citizens become instruments of control. He was particularly harsh toward leaders who hide behind media platforms while their populations suffer. According to Traore, some heads of state use televised speeches and coordinated messaging not to calm tensions, but to intimidate, confuse, and divide. In such environments, truth becomes a casualty long before bullets fly. The role of media, especially social media, was one of his most pointed concerns. Traore accused certain figures of spending every day spitting venom, deliberately inflaming ethnic and political hatred. These individuals, he suggested, may never carry weapons themselves, yet their words prepare the ground for violence just as effectively. For American audiences, the pattern is familiar. The 20th century showed how propaganda, fear campaigns, and dehumanizing language can turn neighbors into enemies. Once that threshold is crossed, restoring trust becomes exponentially harder. Traore's warning extends beyond borders. A destabilized West Africa would not remain isolated. Refugee flows would increase. Smuggling networks would expand. Extremist groups would find new recruiting grounds. Global supply chains, especially those tied to minerals, agriculture, and energy, would feel the shock. In other words, the Black Winter would not stop at Africa's shoreline. Yet Traore refused to frame this future as unavoidable. He emphasized choice. Societies, he argued, reach moments where restraint becomes revolutionary, where refusing to retaliate is an act of strategy, not weakness. He urged citizens to remain calm, even when provoked, to resist manipulation, and to understand that violence between Africans only accelerates political collapse. The political consequence of heeding this warning, he implied, would be the strengthening of indigenous institutions, alliances built on shared survival rather than external approval. The consequence of ignoring it would be familiar cycles of intervention dependency and lost generations. At its core, this part of the speech confronts a hard truth: wars may be declared by leaders, but they are endured by civilians and remembered by history. From an American perspective, warnings like the one issued by Ibrahim Traoré often arrive framed as distant regional concerns, something to be handled by diplomats, aid agencies, or security briefings far from everyday life. But history suggests that moments labeled regional instability rarely stay regional for long. The Sahel sits at a strategic crossroads. It links North Africa to sub-Saharan Africa, connects Atlantic trade routes to inland resources, and borders regions already strained by migration pressures and armed conflict. When instability spreads here, its effects ripple outward, economically, politically, and strategically. For decades, U.S. and Western policy toward Africa has leaned on familiar tools: security partnerships, counterterrorism, training development aid, and electoral support. In theory, these approaches aim to stabilize. In practice, many African societies view them as incomplete at best and destabilizing at worst, especially when they appear disconnected from local realities. Traoré's speech implicitly challenges that model. He does not reject cooperation outright. What he questions is a system where African security depends on external approval, where media narratives are shaped abroad, and where internal divisions are quietly tolerated because they serve geopolitical convenience. From this perspective, the Black Winter is not just a security threat, it is a failure of the global order to recognize how modern conflicts are engineered. For American viewers who lived through the Cold War, this dynamic should feel familiar. Proxy wars rarely announce themselves as such. They begin with instability, selective outrage, and competing narratives about democracy and order. Over time, they leave behind weakened states and disillusioned populations, while outside powers move on to the next crisis. Globally, reactions to Traoré's message have followed predictable lines. Some Western analysts describe his rhetoric as alarmist or authoritarian, warning that strong language can justify repression. Others, particularly in parts of the global South, interpret it as overdue honesty, a leader naming uncomfortable truths that polite diplomacy avoids. What often goes missing in these debates is the civilian dimension. If West Africa descends into deeper chaos, the consequences will not be confined to policy papers. Refugee flows toward Europe and beyond will intensify. Extremist groups will find new spaces to operate. Competition over minerals, energy, and agricultural supply chains will sharpen. Global markets will absorb the shock whether they acknowledge the cause or not. For the United States, this raises a quiet but critical question. Is stability best achieved by managing outcomes or by addressing the roots of division that make crises inevitable? Traoré's insistence on calm restraint and internal unity complicates the caricature of a reckless revolutionary. He does not call for confrontation with the West. He calls for Africans to stop fighting one another because fractured societies are easier to dominate than united ones. Whether one agrees with his politics or not, the warning deserves consideration. The world has seen what happens when regions are dismissed until collapse forces attention. By then, choices narrow, costs rise, and lives are already lost. From a global standpoint, the message is clear. Ignoring the early signs of fracture is not neutrality. It is risk deferred, and history shows that deferred risks rarely disappear on their own. As the speech in Bamako drew to a close, there was no triumphant ending, no applause-driven slogan, no promise that everything would be easy or resolved quickly. What remained instead was a warning, calm, deliberate, and unsettling from Ibrahim Traoré: winter is not avoided by denial. It is faced by preparation. The idea of a black winter lingers because it speaks to something deeper than Africa alone. History shows that civilizations rarely collapse in a single moment. They fracture gradually through division, complacency, and the quiet normalization of chaos. By the time consequences become visible to the outside world, options are already limited. Traoré's message, stripped of metaphor, is ultimately about responsibility. Not just the responsibility of leaders, but of citizens, media voices, intellectuals, and international partners. He argues that when people refuse to see danger coming or worse, help disguise it, they become participants in the outcome, whether they intend to or not. For Africa, the stakes are immediate. Continued fragmentation risks another lost generation, one shaped by displacement, insecurity, and economic dependency. For the Sahel in particular, the cost of failure would not only be measured in territory lost or institutions weakened, but in human lives permanently altered. For the rest of the world, including the United States, the implications are just as real. A destabilized West Africa would accelerate migration pressures, expand extremist networks, and intensify competition over resources critical to global supply chains. Ignoring those dynamics does not insulate distant nations from their effects. It merely postpones engagement until crises become unavoidable. Yet the conclusion of Traoré's speech was not despair. It was restraint. He urged calm where anger would be easier, communication where retaliation would feel justified, unity where manipulation seeks to divide. In doing so, he offered a counterintuitive idea that discipline and patience may be the most radical tools available in an era designed to provoke reaction. Whether one agrees with Traoré's leadership or questions his methods, the underlying challenge cannot be dismissed. Africa is changing. Old frameworks no longer explain new realities, and voices from the Sahel are demanding to be heard not as subjects of policy, but as authors of their own future. So the final question belongs not only to Africans, but to all of us watching from afar. Do we listen when warnings are issued early or only after consequences arrive? Is unity still possible before the winter deepens, or will history once again teach its lessons at the highest cost? If you believe this conversation matters, please share this message. If you follow Africa news, care about Burkina Faso, and are trying to understand the rise of leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, consider subscribing. Because sometimes the most important stories are not the loudest, they are the ones quietly telling us what comes next.